Okay, I know it is an absolutely ridiculous name, but I've decided to name this approach for managing early labor contractions the Limp Noodle approach. In today's episode, I'll share about what it is, why it helps, and how you can take this approach in your own birth. So, let's get into it. Do you believe that Jesus belongs in the center of every part of your life, including labor? Does a natural or low intervention birth appeal to you, but you feel overwhelmed on how to prepare for one? Are you so ready to feel confident, at peace, and even excited as you partner with the Lord to bring new life into this world? Because if so, you are in the right place, friend. Welcome to the Faithful Labor Podcast. I'm your host, Audrey Stinson, Bible-believing Christian, childbirth educator, wife, and mama to 4. 2 born via C-section and 2 delivered at home. After going through 2 challenging deliveries where I outsourced my birth decisions and left my faith out of the process, the Lord graciously led me to experience 2 redemptive home births. Now, they are redemptive not because they happened at home, but because through prayer, study, and wise guidance, I learned to trust God's design for birth and believe wholeheartedly that He was with me, for me, and faithful through it all. In this podcast, you'll gain a deeper understanding of physiological birth, hear inspiring stories from fellow Christian moms and experts, discover holistic tips for pregnancy and postpartum, and above all, find biblical encouragement to help you keep Christ at the center of your birth preparation. So grab your water bottle, settle in, and let's get your heart and mind prepared for the faith-deepening experience of laboring with God and for His glory. Well, hey guys, and welcome. I am so glad you are here for today's episode, and I am really excited to be including this episode in the launch of my show because I want you guys to start practicing this technique so that by the time birth is here for you, you are ready to implement it. Not just because you've been practicing it with what I'm going to be breaking down today, but also because you understand why, when you take this approach, this really ridiculously named approach that I came up with, you understand that you're working with your body rather than working against your body, which is the goal of what we want to do in birth. We want to work with our bodies and help support our bodies doing what God designed them to do, rather than finagling with the process and making it more challenging than it needs to be. So, I am going to equip you with the techniques used in this approach, give you an idea of what these can actionably look like in labor, and then hopefully I'm going to guide you into an understanding of why this relaxation approach is so important, and that will then fuel you and encourage you to actually implement it in your own birth. So let's get into it. What is this limp noodle approach that I'm talking about? For starters, I want you to imagine with me a limp noodle. It's important. I need you to visualize this, okay? You can use whatever kind of pasta you want. My preference is spaghetti, but you can choose your own. And I want you to just imagine a limp noodle. Okay? Have you done it? Great. So the noodle, it is limp. It is not what you find when you get it from the store and you come home with it in the box. It's not the hard, linear shaped thing. It is floppy, it is flimsy, it is limp. There is no tension in it. And that is what I want you to be thinking of your body as being whenever a contraction happens in early labor. And the reason why I'm having you do this little imagery practice with me right now is because whenever you are in your labor and you are experiencing those early contractions, I want you to go back and remember that weird thing that podcast lady said to you about being a limp noodle. And I want you to think of the limp noodle and I want you to be the limp noodle. Okay, I'm done saying limp noodle now. But hopefully this does stick out to you and you do remember it. Not for the sake of the silly word picture of the pasta, but of what it represents, which is to be completely relaxed and the absolute opposite of rigid whenever you feel a contraction coming on in early labor. Now let's get into why this matters. Why is relaxation so important and so helpful to incorporate in dealing with contractions in the birth process? First, We have to understand that being relaxed when discomfort or pain arises in our bodies is not our knee jerk response. That is something that we have to work against and we have to practice for because your body's initial response when it encounters any sort of discomfort or pain is not going to be to relax. You can see this evidenced in whenever you stub your toe or you cut yourself. You're typically going to be tensing up or applying pressure to that area. You might even cry out in pain with a more higher pitch or shrill sound. And those are all perfectly normal, natural bodily responses to pain stimuli. But in birth, tension works against your body's ability to open up and let the baby descend. And on top of that, more tension often yields more pain in birth, which of course we don't want. So, there is a concept called the pain, tension, fear cycle in birth. And the idea behind this is fear creates tension, tension creates or increases pain, and then pain feeds more fear, and then you start the vicious loop all over again. But what relaxation does, and intentionally fighting against that urge that we have in our bodies to tense up in reaction to pain or discomfort, when we break that cycle with relaxation, we can transform how we experience contractions and get ourselves out of that pain, tension, fear cycle. All right, now that we understand what this approach is and why it matters, why relaxing our bodies during contractions matters, let's get into some of the practicals of how you can start training your body to do this so that when labor does start, you have been practicing and you are ready to implement this approach. Here we go. The first part of your training is going to be progressive muscle relaxation. So, what this will look like is you're going to practice releasing tension in each part of your body. So, you can start at your toes or you can start at your head, whichever direction makes more sense to you. But start at your toes or your head and work your way all the way through to the opposite side of your body, imagining each area becoming soft and limp like a noodle as you're going through it. And as you're doing this, take like 5 seconds for each body part, that body region. So, for example, if I'm going to start at my toes, I am thinking about my toes, obviously, and I am seeing if there's any tension, if there's any curling, if there's any muscle contraction, and I want to release it. Sometimes it can help people to first tense, tense, tense as hard as they can in that particular area, and then release all the way so they can feel the gradual releasing to know that their body is relaxing completely. The next technique to practice in this approach is deep breathing. And I am going to give you an example of the counts that I have used for my own births that works for me, but it is something that you're going to have to figure out that works unique for you and your natural flow of breath. So if you start trying to keep up with my count and do it the way that I have, and it doesn't work for you, just adjust and find something that's more natural that just ultimately helps you relax. That is the point here, okay? So for deep breathing, you're going to breathe in deeply through your nose. For me, it was a count of 4. I would hold for 2, and then I would slowly exhale through my mouth for about a count of 6. And while you are doing this deep breathing, you are still making that connection to your body and being intentional to relax, letting your body soften with each exhale. So, if you have a moment, I would encourage you even to pause this episode and go ahead and set a timer on your phone for maybe a minute. And I want you to just practice. You can do the same count that I described that I did with the 4, 2, and 6. Or you can play around with it and see maybe you need it to be 5 on the inhale, maybe you need to be 7 on the exhale, whatever numbers work for your unique breath. But just try it out and see what works and what gives you that relaxed feeling at the end of that minute. The next bit of practice that you can be doing for this approach is visualization. So, when those contractions are happening and you are moving into this place of relaxing into them, I usually found myself with my eyes closed. And I think that's a pretty common response when you're trying to just focus on relaxing. But with that, it can also be helpful to have a mental image that comes to mind when you are in the midst of being a limp noodle. So, for example, for me, I thought of a place in my life that has always brought me immense peace and joy, which was my grandparents' house. They have land out in East Texas, and I loved watching the sunset over there. I would sit out and look out on the pasture for hours and just enjoy being outside in God's creation. That being said, that was my visualized area. That was the calm picture that came to mind whenever I had my eyes closed and I was relaxing. So, whatever that image or that peaceful place is for you, just take time, maybe before you go to bed at night or in the morning before you get started for your day, and just sit in the quiet and think about that place or think about that picture in your mind so that whenever it is time for labor to start, you can already have this beautiful image that you've created that you can call upon while you are closing your eyes and relaxing into each contraction. And lastly, the final little technique that you can be doing here as you prepare to implement the limp noodle approach in your actual labor is body scans. So, this is going to sound kind of similar to that progressive muscle relaxation I talked about earlier, but it is different. So, for body scans, this is something that you can do while you're standing at the kitchen sink doing dishes or doing some other task around the house. And I want you in the moment of doing those other activities to just assess, where are you carrying tension? Where are your muscles contracting right now in that moment that they don't need to be? One way that you can practice this is by setting timers on your phone throughout the day to randomly go off. And when they do, whatever you're doing, just take a moment, stop what you're doing for even just a split second, and think about where you're carrying tension that you don't need to. So, for example, if I'm at the kitchen sink and my timer goes off, and I just stand at the kitchen sink and think about, okay, what muscles am I using right now? Okay, obviously I'm using my legs. I need those. I need to keep contracting those muscles to stand upright. But what other things? Oh, my neck is super tense. Oh, my shoulders are super, super tight. Okay, what else? And doing this helps you recognize when you are utilizing or using muscles that you don't actually need to be, and you can intentionally relax them. And this will be really helpful to you when you're in labor and you reactively start to tense. Then, if you do a body scan during labor because you've been practicing pre labor, you'll be able to say, oh, I see that I'm tense right here in between my eyebrows. I need to relax there. Oh, my shoulders are getting tense. I need to relax there. And that can be really helpful to get you into a more relaxed state. Now it's time to put it all together. So let's talk about what this is actually going to look like for you when labor starts. Okay. This is the time to put all those practices into action. So, as a contraction builds, you're going to have a choice in each of those moments. Each new contraction brings about a new choice to make. Are you going to fight them or are you going to lean in and relax into them? So, let's review and practically speak about how you can do this. Number one, you can go limp. Picture yourself as a noodle. Be the limp noodle, remember? And when the contraction begins, let every muscle in your body release. You can even imagine yourself melting into the surface beneath you, whatever that is. So for me, with my last labor, this looked like me literally flopping on the bed, being as limp as I could, and whatever position I flumped onto the bed with, I stayed in that same position the entire contraction. So whatever that looks like for you, just make sure you have a safe place to land and relax everything. Next, you're going to want to use your breath as your anchor. So use slow, deep breaths like you were practicing in your pregnancy to guide your body into relaxation. Focus on the exhale, letting go of any tension you're holding every time you breathe out. And as you are breathing, as you are being limp, the next technique that you are going to want to put into action is thinking on that beautiful place or that calming picture so that whenever you are in the midst of that contraction, you also have this image that brings about peace and calm. Now, as Christians, we know that a beautiful picture or a really lovely place that we can call to mind will only keep us relaxed and fearless for so long. Ultimately, we have to keep our mind stayed on God. So, in tandem with this visualization, I would highly recommend that you write out scriptures to be read over you by your husband, by your doula, by whoever is going to be in the room supporting you that keep you grounded in God's character, in His love for you, in His promises to you, so that when those moments of anxiety or fear or tension rise up, you're able to relax into God's faithfulness to you, trusting that He has your body and your baby and the entirety of your labor in His hands, and He is going to equip you for each new contraction that comes your way. There is no need to fear, only to trust in Him. And if you would like some help in finding scriptures that you can memorize now as you prepare for birth, or that you can write down and have read over you, I actually have a set of free birth cards that you can sign up for and download, and I will include the link to those in the show notes. Some are straight scriptures, some are prayers, and others are just truth-filled reminders inspired by a variety of different Bible verses. So if that sounds helpful to you, go ahead and snag those, and I pray that they are a blessing to you. Now, the final way that we can help keep your body relaxed and keep you in this limp noodle state is by coming up with a few cues that you can pass along to your husband or your doula that you would like them to use during labor that can help remind you to relax. So, in the moments that you're going through a contraction and maybe your eyebrows start to get really tense or you start to squeeze your eyes shut, and your husband or your doula sees you doing this, they can come up to you with this word or phrase that you guys have already rehearsed and talked about and say that to you, and it will trigger you to remember, oh, that's right, time to relax, and then you can relax. So, for example, that could be something as simple as they literally will come up to you and say, relax, and then they touch you in the area that you're carrying tension. Or, for the sake of this podcast episode, they could come up to you and say, noodle. And that could be your key word to remind you to completely relax again. And I personally found this really helpful because even though I really tried to relax every part of me, a lot of times I would carry tension in my eyebrows. I would furrow my eyebrows during contractions. And so having my doula very gently come and remind me to relax there was exactly what I needed to go back into this limp state. So there you have it. This is the limp noodle approach. We have talked about what it is, why it's important that we relax our bodies during contractions. We discussed some practices that you can be doing right now in pregnancy to prepare for implementing them in birth. And then finally, we've covered what this might look like to put these techniques into practice on your actual Labor Day. So I really do hope that in me naming this approach something so ridiculous that it sticks with you and that you do try to practice it and prepare your body for it so that by the time your baby's birthday arrives, you are ready to put these techniques into action. So practice and train now, and when labor comes, you'll be ready to go limp, let go, and relax, all the while leaning on the Lord to strengthen and uphold you through each contraction. Before we part ways, I want to read and pray Isaiah 41:10 over you. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Amen. God bless, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks for joining me today, friend. If today's episode blessed you, the best way you can let me know is by leaving a written review on Apple Podcasts. You can also tag me on Instagram with a screenshot of today's episode at faithful.labor. Now, before we part ways, I'd like to pray Ephesians 3:20 over you. Now to Him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work within us, I pray that God would be mightily glorified through you as you seek to honor Him with your faithful labor. Amen, and God bless.